Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Diamond Debates session. Today, our guest is, or my proponent is, opponent, so to speak, is Wesley Tucker, who is the CEO for now of Tracr, the traceability platform that's being developed by De Beers and has made a lot of inroads into the industry. And we are going to be discussing the topic adapt or die, whether the industry should pivot to value, and we're going to understand what that means. So buckle your seatbelts for the next 45 minutes or so. It should be an interesting ride. And as always, the Diamond Debates series is supported by Sarin, and we appreciate that support. For over 35 years, Sarin has asked the industry's big questions, providing advanced AI technology to drive the diamond sector forward. Imagining a more efficient and more innovative industry is central to Sarin's DNA and essential to long-term growth across the entire diamond ecosystem. And so that brings us to the beginning of our little debate. And Wes, when we talk about, there are many, I guess as we've discussed, we can break up the topic into different parts. Adapt or die, the industry must pivot to value. What does all that mean? And I guess a good place to start might be, what must it adapt to? And sometimes I don't know if the industry quite understands that dynamic. So what are your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, absolutely. Avi, thanks. So first off, thanks for having me, and thanks for everybody that's joined. As everybody, some people that obviously know me, I'm not a lifer in the diamond industry, so I've known you, Avi, for I don't know, 4 or 5 years alone. But I've really enjoyed our discussions and our arguments about the state of the industry and the future of it, and it's really nice to have this platform to do it. So thanks for making this possible, and I'm looking forward to finding. Try not to find too much common ground. Let's find the things we disagree with and discuss, and hopefully we'll have some fun. So I think that's right. And also it's useful as a guy who is obviously, I think as people know me, I have run Tracr for the last about 4 years, and I have some sort of experience outside of the industry beyond that. And I think in some ways that's helpful because I come from outside the industry, so I look at it with a slightly different lens. And also, the privilege of running Tracr means, and I think there are a few jobs in the industry that have that breadth. We span from the mining companies through to the wholesalers, the manufacturers, the labs, the retailers, etc. So it's a pretty good breadth. And I think, breaking it down, let's start with the adapt or die. So for me, I think that we have to come to terms with the fact that the diamond industry, and when I say diamond industry, I mean both the natural and lab-grown diamond industry. We're going to get into lab-grown, I'm sure, at some point. But yeah, I see it as one thing. And the reason for that is when a consumer walks into a store and buys diamond jewelry, they don't differentiate the way we differentiate. They create value, and that value is what we use all the way up the value chain. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on where you sit, a big chunk of that's now lab grown. So we need to think of this as one industry because they all kind of work together. I think from the adapt or die point of view, when I joined De Beers and Tracr 5 years ago, there were some sort of existential forces and things that were acting on the industry that I think have kind of laid the foundation for what we're experiencing today. And my feeling is that it's a structural change in the industry. We'll probably get into that a little bit. And when I look at it, starting at the supply side, and we must talk about that at some point, but we have sort of supplier fragmentation. So those that mine diamonds and sell diamonds, 10 or 20 years ago, there were a handful. Now there's quite a few more, and it's in the hands of many more, so it's a bit less controlled. There are far more complex geopolitics at play, and that's not just Russia, Ukraine, and tariffs, but all of the other things that are going on in the market. Then there is the lab-grown factor. That's a fundamental shift in the last 5 years. It's fundamentally changed the way the industry works and thinks and sells, and we'll get into that. Not all bad, some of it good. The thing we don't talk enough about is the changing demand demographics. So I think there was a really interesting article about this being the first year that Gen Zs will make up the proponent portion of those getting engaged. And I don't believe as an industry we've engaged with that generation well enough at all. And that's something we'll talk about. And then lastly, and I think Martin Rappaport talks about this a lot, the largest diamond mine in the world is in Florida, because there's a lot of new sort of the old diamonds, pre-loved diamonds coming onto the market, and that's going to have a shift in terms of the way we think. And if I think about all of those things, there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that if we do not pivot and we don't start looking towards sources of value as an industry, I don't believe a lot of us will survive. And I think that's the right kind of starting point for this discussion.
Well, some of those points, and I mean, I agree with those are the disruptors that
Yeah,
are
the
shaking up
reasons to change.
that are shaking up the industry. So, but they kind of on some of them sort of are putting pressure on the demand side, and others are adding to supply. You know, if
Yeah.
particularly that last point that the recycled or the secondhand diamond market is adding to the pot of diamonds out there. So, is the adaptation to an excess of supply that seems to be that seems to have plagued the industry for more than a decade, I would say by now. You know, is that the adaptation? The demand side, we know that we've got to increase demand, and we have these threats the new competition, not only from lab grown but from experiential, the experience economy and technology and all these sort of choices that consumers have. But on the supply side, is there an adaptation that the industry needs to? My feeling is that there's an adaptation to the way the market has evolved. That on the demand side, there's a segmentation of the market, as you know, our little blurb for this discussion described. And on the supply side, there's just there are more diamonds in the market than ever before. You know.
Yeah, I think when we think about supply, and I most of the disagreements I think we have in the industry is everybody's like, don't worry about supply, just it's about demand. If we stimulate demand, the industry will be okay. And I think that's mostly true. If there was infinite demand, we wouldn't be having a conversation about supply. But there isn't infinite demand, and supply has definitely affected the kind of dynamics in the midstream in terms of the way it operates, and it's obviously affecting those on the upstream. So maybe we talk a little bit about supply and then we can move on to demand. I think that what I think we miss is when we talk about demand and we ask for category marketing, traditionally those that fund category marketing are those that are on the supply side. They're the miners, right? That's what it has done for decades. It's what they continue to do through the Natural Diamond Council. The Luanda Accord is the producers coming in, spending money on the marketing and the demand. But if you are on that mining side and you have the structural shift in the way the demand is driving your product, as in lab grown has come into the market, so the lower quality goods have definitely been hurting in recent times, and that sort of traditional strong market has dropped away. If you're a mining company, how do you deal with that? You can't pick and choose the diamonds you pull out of the ground. You have to mine almost uniformly, and you can try and target it. But all of a sudden, your economics become challenging. And then because your economics are challenging, you do need to sell to a certain degree to stay in the market. And we want to continue to spend money on the downstream. And I think that's kind of lost a lot in the industry as we keep saying, well, let's just keep marketing. Just keep marketing. But at the same time, we're not giving them the benefit of the fact that they have a broader product mix that they need to sell, and that product mix has changed. And I think of all the things we're going to talk about today, that pivot is probably one of the most difficult pivots because it's a very traditional, entrenched model of operation in how you mine. How do you change that in a changing dynamic? And I think finding a way of managing that supply into the market that makes these companies profitable, that they can then invest in marketing, is quite important. And it's quite important for the whole industry, not just for the mining companies and the producing countries as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of been a theme throughout the different debates that I've had in this series, that there's a contraction within the industry, and it's not happening. I mean, it's happening to some extent at the retail level, but I think that's more organic. You know, the structural disruption and the contraction that's being forced upon the industry is happening in the midstream and then at the mining. And I think we saw very strongly at the mining sector this last year. You know, as those pressures really, I mean, you have a bit of a finger in the mining segment, but I don't remember a period or a period where there's been such a quest for funding within the mining segment, you know, And it's particularly among the mid-tier sort of junior miners that they really came under a lot of pressure in the last year, and that's because the threshold of operating a mine has increased. Why? Because as you say, the there isn't the spectrum of diamonds that are in demand that they're recovering are has narrowed, and so like I said, we've discussed that before, um, that I think does stem from the demand side, because I think what's happening at retail is that there are certain segments of the market that are holding strong. When you think of the luxury, the high-end luxury groups, they're doing okay, and the higher ends or stronger tier one retail jewelers are doing all right. You know. Um, but there's a kind of a pivot to value in that sense, where that segment of the market is doing well, and it's leaving a hole within the rest of the retail market, where diamonds or segments of diamonds that were not that were previously in demand are no longer, and that's filtering through to the rest of the pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the one thing I think we're not touching on is the fact that diamonds are becoming more difficult to get out the ground and to mine. And obviously, you see the investments made into an Cut 9 and some of the underground projects at Lucara. So a lot of investment needed to get the same number of diamonds out the ground, and so you've got that double effect happening. And I think if you were on the mining side, I think the pivot of that, and the government side, the pivot of that is really thinking about the dollar value that you're spending, not just in your operations and what you're doing in marginal mines, etc., but also on that demand side. Like, are you linking the demand to the things that you're mining and producing? And we're trying to understand the demand demographics better, that we can help to improve the demand for those products that are being mined in the source countries. And then obviously things like tariffs and that are just added challenges on top of what we're already looking at. So you've definitely got, I think, in that part of the supply chain, on the supply side, you're going to get a lot more of that need, cash flow required, money required, must push diamonds into the market, which then will keep creating that ripple of potential oversupply. And we're going to have to manage that as we go forward. Otherwise, you don't have that balanced midstream, which is what we really look for in a healthy market.
Yeah.
And I think that's, the supply side is, there are only a handful of players. There's only so many things you can do. When you go to the downstream, which is what I think you're referencing, it's far more complex in terms of independents, brands, the US market being the largest, etc. And I think that demand section is the thing that really does need to pivot, the way in which we stimulate demand, how we look to stimulate demand and focus on value. And then as a retailer, how we look to capture that value, which I think we haven't done much modernization, if you will, and improvements over the last decade.
So I guess the question then, like that comes to mind is then, what defines value for the diamond market? Where does the value lie? And
And I think if we go back to fundamentals, right? And I think you got to. It's funny because the industry it's an emotional industry by nature of what we do. In this industry, we create moments for people that spend a lot of money to celebrate something that is quite an emotional moment. And I think, so when we get caught in the emotions of it, it becomes quite difficult to look at it. But if we kind of zoom out and we think about, diamond jewelry as a category is something like an $80 billion market, right? That's the size of the prize that we all the whole way through the value chain build up for that purchase to happen. And half of that is in the US. I think the first challenge is when we think about that value pie, we need to grow it. It needs to get bigger. We need more people to be purchasing diamond jewelry because that's how an industry grows. It grows through that, right?
Yeah.
And I think the demand stimulation of late hasn't really addressed those things. So that's kind of make the pie a bit bigger. And then I think if you're thinking about natural diamonds, you're thinking about that as opposed to lab grown. I think that question, so what's happened over a period of time is lab grown has taken a chunk of that 80 billion. And I think something like over a half of pieces purchased in the US are lab grown, and probably 25% of the value there now is lab grown, or give or take. Like, I don't have the exact numbers, but it's a big chunk, right? And I think if you're a retailer, what you're experiencing now is you've made pretty good dollar margins and really high percentage margins over the last few years on lab grown, as we all know. And you've started selling more of those pieces and less of the natural pieces. I think some people are new entrants to the market, so some wouldn't have bought any diamonds, and now they're buying lab grown, which is great. So we're attracting new people into the industry, which is good. But some have pivoted across. The wholesale price, as we know, of lab grown has dropped really low, and slowly the retail price is dropping, and so that dollar margin value is decreasing. And every odd percent it decreases down, you've got to sell more than that in terms of units. And I think when you're a retailer now, you've got to think about a couple of things. You've got to think about, how do I get more people to come and buy diamonds from me, diamond jewelry from me, or just jewelry in general, if that's what you're selling. And I think that's a competition game between, we mentioned a little bit in the beginning, that's about how do I get people that we're going to go into an eye store, or we're going to go into go buy a handbag, or we're going to go buy, a new dress, and I get them into buy jewelry. Those that would have bought experiences and travel, or would have gone on their phone and done those things. Those Gen Zs that are getting married and are maybe not purchasing the same level of jewelry because they want a signal, etc. That's the growing the pie piece, and I think that's really important. And we must discuss that, and I think there's a huge amount the industry's been trying to do in that space, and I think there's more we can do to grow that and work at a broader level rather than at a higher level, and that's kind of that category marketing piece.
Yeah.
And the second for me is then your product mix. How do you make sure that you have the highest value product mix? And these two things kind of work well together to then make sure that you as a company are going to be more profitable. And I think the current strategy that we're working on as retailers is probably not the one that's going to get you to maximum value.
Well, so I'll push back on the idea that you're looking at it as one category, with the natural and lab grown as part of the broader diamond jewelry industry.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if that's and it's very difficult for the industry to think in those terms, and I'm not sure if it should, because that naturally then reduces the monetary value of the product, because you are inadvertently encouraging the sale of lab grown. Because if our true competitor is experience, is cool luxury gadgets, technology and things like that, then the argument is then just buy this cheaper diamond, this lower priced diamond, and still have those experiences. Whereas as you say, so that then begs the question: how do you compete with those real luxury experiences? You've got to position the diamond jewelry as a luxury product, and clumping it together with lab grown is I think counterintuitive in that sense.
I mean, so in some aspects, it worries me that when you disagree with me, because then I might be in dangerous territory. But equally, that's kind of the whole point of this discussion. So I'm glad you disagree with me. So let's get into it. Maybe I need to clarify a few things. I think the first is that when I say it is one industry, I mean that it is one industry. Whether the two products should be positioned separately, whether we should sell one or the other or not, the fact today is that lab grown is an intrinsic part of the diamond industry. It's a huge part of the diamond industry, and that's happened. 5 years ago, you could have said to me that it's a separate product and a different thing and all of those things, and I'd agree with you. And I'd also say, and the consumers know that because they're not buying it. Today, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on where you sit, some people made a lot of money from it. Where I sit, which is about understanding sort of meaningful, lasting value and how we build, host communities, survive on mines, etc. Lab grown isn't as sustainable for me as those. But the nature of the industry today is that these two things are very, very closely positioned at a retail point, and in such a way that it's managed to capture a quarter of the value in the US. It must be that way, right? And so I'm definitely not saying that we shouldn't be positioning them separately. We shouldn't be driving to the higher margin. Absolutely. We definitely should be doing that. The question is how do you manage that pivot? Because the vast majority of retailers in the US today have both sitting in their store, and they're struggling. They're struggling in two ways. One, I want to keep coming back to it. They're struggling in three ways. One, they're struggling to attract new people into the door because the pie is not growing. So we mustn't lose sight of that. But then they're also struggling with the concept that I need to move these consumers away from lab grown because I've got to get back to your point, to a higher value, more meaningful product, etc. But we can't say that they mustn't do it because it's already done. Those products are already in the stores and they're already being positioned as pretty much the same product. so to speak. And that's the pivot that we need to manage, because the value for the industry is not going to lie in lab grown in the future as it stands today without that large natural component supporting the entire industry. But we can't ignore it. Like it's this bad thing that will go away, because it's not going to go away on its own. It's going to have to go away with intentional management, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not convinced that the industry has has a problem with attracting customers.
Well,
Because I think
new customers, new customers. Like when I
well,
say new, what I mean is it's an $80 billion market, and it's stayed an $80 billion market for the last 5 years, if not contracted. Therefore, we must be struggling to attract.
but I think in recent times that's a value that's an average transaction value issue. Not so I think my
I
gut
hear you.
feeling and my the data that I have available for it is maybe limited. But my feeling is that the volume of sales is up, and that tells me
Yeah,
that we are attracting.
per unit. Yeah,
No,
but I think
the number of pieces
yeah,
of jewelry, the quantity of jewelry diamond jewelry, as a blanket term, we're
DJ.
selling is it continues to increase. But the average value of those transactions has steadily declined because we're pivoting to a lower value
But
product. And so I
so
don't
I
so
agree
much.
with you on the value piece,
Yeah.
obviously, because the lab grown, if lab grown's taken 25, it's 60% of the volume of pieces, and its percentage is lower. I agree with you. I think we're probably selling more things. And then there are people that are coming into buying diamond jewelry that wouldn't have bought it before because they may be buying lab grown. And so I do agree with you. I think it's, I think, but I think it's a mistake as an industry to not continue to focus on attracting even more consumers into the market to help us with this, with the broader broadening of the pie in terms of what it speaks. Also, because we have to manage that, we as an industry now have to start getting that price point to come back up again, and it's going to take time to get that price point back up again to support the industry. And I think you need to do both, and I think you can do both. I think you can attract more clients and consumers away from other things into the market, especially with the Gen Zs coming through. But we have to be doing it in a very specific and targeted way. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I don't disagree. I mean, of course, we need to
Of course,
bring
we
in,
want more
of
customers.
course, we need to bring in more new consumers,
Yeah,
and one of the maybe a misstep that the industry had was not using lab grown as an entry point product and then
yeah,
upselling to natural.
I agree with that.
I'm not sure if it's too late for that.
Controversially, because now I don't want to get too controversial, but this, we need to make it fun. But I do think in the early days of the light box, I think that was kind of the intention, was to try and lower the price point, make it something that's more of an entry level thing. Now, a longer debate maybe for another day as to whether that's the right or wrong thing to
Yeah,
do.
I've got a lot to say about light.
And I know everybody has a lot to say, and I have mixed opinions on these things. But I do think intentionally that was why it came out, and there were some ideas to do it. But I agree, we didn't achieve that. We ended up putting the two products right next to each other. The one part of the industry marketed it in a certain way, that they were ethical and whatever and whatever. And in a consumer's mind, they do see these things as very similar, if not interchangeable. And I think that the management away from that isn't the mudslinging exercise that we've been doing before. Because again, if 1 and 2 is already lab grown, you can't shout and scream about in the stores. You can't shout and scream about being a sub product, because how are we going to manage that transition? We've got to manage it in a much more responsible way, where we are positioning the mix in the stores and attracting the customers to come in and want to buy the natural thing, because it is a higher margin point. You're going to make more dollar value from that thing than you will from the other one. I think that's the approach that we need to be taking. And I tend to agree with you. Like, I think that we didn't use that opportunity, but the opportunity is still there. The product still exists.
Yeah, but I don't see how you do that without differentiating between the two products and having a clear differentiation between them. If you're clumping them as one, I think, and that's the point that I wanted to bring across, is that of course we need to bring in new customers, but the real challenge is what we're selling in the store and pivoting to the higher value
Yeah.
product. And I don't think that's happening.
So I think, so maybe two examples. So I think, and then it's It's funny because when I see it as one industry as part of the same industry, and I had a feeling it was going to be controversial. But I didn't realize the reason it would be controversial. It's just that I just think it's in the fabric of what we do as an industry. It's there, like it's part of it. Like, if you go to Surat, there's lab-grown factories and natural factories. If you go to the retailers, there's lab-grown natural. It's part of the industry, whether you like it or not, or you want it or not. It's part of the industry. I'm not saying they're the same thing. I'm not saying the whole industry is one thing. It's a very overly complicated thing. But maybe when we talk about that point of sale, let's use some examples where actually there is clear differentiation between natural and lab grown. And a couple of examples I'll give you. So the one is in the branded retail space, the very high luxury branded retail space, they don't use lab grown diamonds. And the Cartiers and the Tiffany's and all of these guys, they just use natural diamonds, and they command a very high price premium because they are a luxury product, they are a branded product, and they invest a lot of money in that space. And so there is clearly there's an opportunity there to command a higher price premium and to stay away from that lower product. So there's one example, right? Branded things.
Yeah.
The other one is when you look at design as the thing that attracts customers. Design in the jewelry and design in the product and the kind of the emotional attachment and the storytelling, etc., is another one that, to be fair, it could be lab grown, but actually it works better when it's natural. It works better when it's a rare product, etc. And then the one underneath that we're seeing more and more is the storytelling aspect. So we speak a lot about traceability and we speak about sanctions, we speak about all these things, but actually the ability to create a unique, meaningful, hyper-personalized experience with a consumer is something that clearly differentiates these two things because there are different products in terms of where they came from and the rarity of them. And in that space, you can create separate products, even store in store. We have a lot of customers that have both in their store, but they're like, well, that's the premium stuff, and this is maybe the more entry-level stuff. And so I think you can do that. And that for me is essentially what we're discussing around the pivot. The pivot is stop blurring the lines between the two, stop dragging the two down with each other, start looking at different ways of differentiating and building meaningful experiences of something that is going to be a better product, and then focus on the value. And the value is new, and when I say new customers, maybe I don't mean, it's a complicated thing because you've got most people only buy one piece of jewelry in their life anyway, right? So a new customer could be that customer again. That would be a new customer because they were only going to buy one piece. Now they're buying two or three. But you're attracting a different kind of consumer that wants to come in and wants to engage in a slightly different way because you're creating something a bit more meaningful. You're linking maybe the engagement to the anniversary through a piece of design or something that you can do because you're hyper-personalizing. I think that's the innovation that we're just not really seeing at scale in the industry and something that we desperately need.
Well, I think part of the challenge of that is that that I think the luxury consumer experience has become hyper personalized, as you said. So you've got to sort of curate that experience for each customer that comes in, and that's and as a result, the sort of cookie cutter approach that the industry's sort of been able to ride.
Pick your price point, pick your diamond, get your diamond, go off. I don't think
but even from a marketing point of view, that sort of blanket approach to category marketing, a diamond is forever, that it's going to resonate with everyone, is no longer as effective as it used to be. And it's also considering that that consumers have such a wide choice in terms of where they allocate their budget. And so that's why I think, as I think we agree that that pivot to value in this, which can mean many things, but in this case it's pivoting to the higher value product being natural compared to lab grown. It begins and ends in that retail store. That's
experience.
The conversation that retailers are having, that jewelers are having with their customers.
So I think to extend it though, because I feel like we always get caught on lab grown as like the single only challenge we have as an industry, right? It's just this lab grown thing because it's got it's a falling price point and it's low and I think it's a statement of fact. It has had that effect. It's definitely if you're a consumer in the US and you've got $3,000 and you go into a store, they're going to buy the slightly bigger, more clear, lab grown because it's cheaper than the other one, and that's hurt the SI2s and the and the I1s or whatever, and and I think that's fact. I think that in the that is, as an industry, this is why I say it's both, because those people that are holding both are the industry, and they need to pivot their mix, right? And they've got to think really smart about it. They've got to be very intentional about how they do it. And I'd look at the big guys like Signet and these guys that are trying to do it while they're listed and have to share quarterly earnings results, and they're trying to do it in a responsible way. It's a big challenge, and I think it's quite fascinating to watch. But if you then look behind that and into the details, so we put the kind of lab grown thing aside, there is a world where we're talking about the product that you're selling, someone's lab grown. We're talking about positioning it as something that's more attractive to a new generation coming through, right? Which is something we haven't really done. We're talking about creating designs and meaningful stories, etc., that are something that is more attractive to the consumers, that then starts putting this product in a slightly different light, which we haven't really done. And I think where I sort of, where I think I agree with you is, and I get this a lot. So I say, well, look, the broader category marketing is something that is useful for the industry. It's funded by the upstream. It should actually be funded by broader, because it should generate, benefit the whole industry. And I'm told by lots of people that that's a terrible idea. The miners that make all the money and they need to do it. But you need to do it more broadly. But then the way you do it needs to fundamentally change. You need to pivot it. And everybody says, well, that's really hard. It's really difficult. I'm like, well, yes, of course it's difficult. That's why we need to do it. But the example I like to use is, what created this industry was really, really clever marketing that was right for the time. And I think about the examples are, in the Second World War, the big adverts were a lady sitting on the beach waiting for her partner to come back from, this lady waiting for her partner to come back from the war, and he's going to reward her commitment by buying her a diamond. Like, that's really, really, it's good marketing. Things like 3 times your salary is insane. Like, we created a world where people will spend we will have a variable monetary amount that you will spend on an engagement. It's unbelievable, right, what we achieve. And I think that shows it can be done. But that's not going to work in the same method that it works today, because the world is fundamentally different. The channels are different. The social media is different. The AI is different, etc. And if you look at the way we're approaching marketing, I think we don't have the lofty ambition because we think it's too hard. And then we need to try and do it in a way that is more targeted and specific to what we're trying to achieve as an industry. And then obviously I don't think it's fair that only the miners are the ones that do category marketing. That doesn't really make any sense, right? Surely we should all be putting together to support the category, because it supports everyone, right?
Well, yeah, I mean that's a very nuanced question and nuanced discussion. The retailers will argue that they do put in every retailer has a marketing budget, and then looking at the margins of your diamond manufacturers and dealers, it's the argument is that it's kind of baked into their rough purchases, and so I think there is, it kind of does have to, and we're seeing now that the lack of that investment by the miners is hitting the miners the most. That they've come most under pressure, and they the ones who need to who can't pick and choose the diamonds that they hold. So they need to broaden the pie. But of course, it's in everyone's interest, and it's being felt across the pipeline.
I mean, let's unpack that for a second, because I think, it's this funny dynamic between the kind of the beer specifically in the mining companies, and this kind of like, they are the ones that are looked to support the industry in times of challenge, but then equally, people don't always like the relationship there. So it's quite an interesting dynamic in the diamond industry that's maybe unique. But when I think about it, and I agree, you've got to kind of completely reframe the way you think about, and I'm not a marketer, so the joy of sitting in this seat is I'm not telling you how to do it, because I have no idea. I'm not even going to pretend to tell you how you market to the new generation on social media and things like that. But what I do think we can do is we can bring people more collectively together. And so I look at really positive things like the Luanda Accord, where governments are coming in, governments that are outside of the normal, kind of consortia are coming in to support category marketing, and I think that's brilliant. I think a mechanism with which that gets put to needs to adapt, needs to pivot into something that is going to be more targeted around a purpose, rather than, as you say, a general noise about diamonds and trying to differentiate natural diamonds, and more around really speaking through the right medium to the right people. And there are a lot of people in the industry that do this very well in terms of the way they use social media and the way that they communicate and they use influencers and more than that, how they influence AI. I mean, the lab grown guys did it very well. If you go on ChatGPT, it's an ethical green diamond, right? They did something right. So I'm pretty sure we could do the reverse of that. I think there's that. But then I think you look at what De Beers is doing with Signet in a joint marketing effort. And that's kind of what I mean. I don't mean that the retailers should just throw money at at a broader marketing campaign, because again, they're far more, they're just more of them, so they're going to get a much smaller share relative to the minor. But if you think about the power of digital today, the ability to brand and reuse and recreate, and I think a lot of the marketing material we see coming out is quite similar, right, in terms of what's coming out of the Natural Diamond Council and that. So it can be rebranded and reskinned, and you can use AI to regenerate this, to use it for your retailer, and you can use geolocation and geopositioning, and all of this tech is just not collectively in an industry being driven in to do something a little bit more effective. And that's true pivot, right? That's a pivot away from glossy adverts, high level billboards, train adverts, into something that's a lot more.
Yeah, actually saw a very interesting video today, actually, which I didn't fully understand, about creating content and the idea or the point that was put across was that you got to keep AI in mind as an audience, as your audience, sorry.
Because, well, if you think about it, so let's go back to that point I said about ChatGPT, right? So my measure, if your job is to differentiate natural and lab grown diamonds, okay, my job is to create the tool that I think people can use to do that in Tracr. It's not to solve the problem. But if that was your job, your one KPI would be every morning to wake up, go into ChatGPT and say, should I buy natural or should I buy lab grown? And ChatGPT will tell you that if you're looking for an ethical, green, low cost alternative, you buy lab grown. And if you're looking for a high value, it'll hold its value and it's more rare, you buy natural. Okay, that for me is somebody has influenced that learning model to be able to give you that answer. Learning models don't just read the internet, they watch the internet too. So to your point, if you're going to create content that gets shared and used, the language, the models that are generating the LLMs are going to go and consume that. And so you need to make it in such a way that it is part of the kind of AI conversation, right? It's hugely important.
Yeah, I mean, what influences that? The volume of content that you're putting out on a certain topic, or is it very specific type of messaging that influences the AI to prioritize it?
I'm at risk of too regularly saying on this call that I'm not an expert, so I've got to be a bit careful to not say I'm not an expert. But I think to claim being an expert in AI today, I think you've got to really know what you're talking about. But generally speaking, it's a little bit like how search engine optimization used to work. Is it looks at the things that are most prolific and popular and shared and linked, and so it's not just about I create a video and it's got lots of information and lots of material and I pop it on YouTube and nobody looks at it. It's not gonna feature in the consumption that it's looking at. But if it is something that is shared and pushed, and I think that's where this green narrative of lab grown came from. There were lots of articles on the internet about lab grown being more, and there was just lots of it being generated, and a lot of that generation was then being shared and proponented around, that it created noise.
Yeah, but I mean, if you think about the historic volume of content and that's been generated about natural diamonds versus lab grown, I don't think I can't imagine that lab grown is.
But to turn the question around, how did ChatGPT decide? Right?
I don't know. I don't know who this ChatGPT character actually is. He seems very agreeable to me, and I'm sometimes wrong. But I mean, we may be a little bit off topic. I do want to go back to that idea of value, and you mentioned the question of design, and I think that's where the game is going to really get interesting, because I think I hate going back to the lab grown question all the time, but I think the lab grown space is ripe for disruption through design. That I think we're going to see some. Firstly, I think there is space for a really strong, beautiful lab-grown brand, which we haven't really seen. We've seen attempts at it, but it doesn't. I'm not sure about the success of them. the
Yeah,
brands that are successful in that lower value point are the Pandoras and Swarovskis of the world.
yeah,
And so I'm just wondering, but then the price points of lab grown are not as linear and as we like to believe. If you look at at Signet's offering, if you look at Pandora's offering, they have different tiers, and the differentiating factor is design essentially, and the quality of the craftsmanship, etc. And so
yeah,
there is space for that, but then I think I think when you look at a high value natural diamond jewelry piece, I don't. there's a sense of luxury that I think the wearer feels that is not comparable and not replicable, and that's where the aspiration
yeah,
of natural diamonds comes into it, and that the industry can sort of accentuate.
yeah. I mean, I obviously I agree with that, and in the creation of something of higher value, that aspirational thing is very important. I agree with you. Where I I think that the three kind of pillars of where this value is going to come from. It's going to come from slightly better experiences, because I just don't think we're there yet. I think in terms of the finding, the purchasing, the engagement, etc., of purchases. I do think the design. So we'll talk about design. And then I think there's that kind of hyper personalization storytelling aspect. And I think the design and the hyper personalization do kind of live a little bit better together. Um, I would also agree that I think where I'm disappointed in lab grown jewelry and diamonds is there isn't a huge amount of innovation. Like, I would have expected more for a product that is, you can cut it and make a mistake and throw it away and cut another one. You can cut it quickly. You can use AI. You can use tech. You can do that. We just made lots of round diamonds. Like, we didn't do anything really all that
Well,
out
because
there, right?
it's what people want, I think. I don't know if they want a
Yeah.
hole in their diamond.
Well, but I think it's what they want, because we're riding on the industry that was created before lab grown came along. So this is going back to the pie. The pie existed, and lab grown came in and said, "I'll take
Yeah,
a piece of that pie because that's what
yeah,
they want." What I'm kind of getting at is, where's the really innovative new cool stuff that's coming from that is a different category. It's a different thing. It's a funky thing to wear on a Friday, but you probably wouldn't wear it at your anniversary or wedding, etc. But I don't want to, because I know you love talking about lab grown, so I'm going to stop talking about lab grown. We go back to design and you go back to hyper personalization. The challenge I think we're going to have as an industry is that once you get into really good design and really high design, and I'm not talking high jewelry, just smart and clever and more personalized, is how do you scale that? So, you go to the Vincenza show in Italy, where we met, and you walk around, it's beautiful stuff that's on the floor there, right? Really, really, really like branded quality design work. But I'm not sure that scales across the size of the industry, because it takes quite a lot of time and effort to be able to do it, right? To be unique and a longer timeline and a longer pipeline. And so, I think with the branded jewelry, they will do very well, and the world will, consumers, and we can see this in the research, they will go to brands, they'll buy behind brands. And I think they need to protect their brands to know where things come from and use traceability. I've got to plug that in there, because I think most of them don't know where it comes from. And if consumers find out that brands don't know where their things come from, there's going to be troubles. But I think the brand is important, but the design element, and how do we get that into the independent retailers, that they are buying high-end designs into their stores to attract that higher level purchase price? I think that's very difficult. But again, in the age of tech and AI and these things, I'm sure it must be quicker and easier to be able to generate new things, because that's a space that's ripe for like creativity and those that are maybe not really placed for it, right? And we need to see broader adoption of that. And then, is that not, to your point? I know we come back to marketing and we think about marketing very much like old school marketing, but if you're putting money into something that is not helping retailers with things like design and tools and digital and tech, is that not a useful investment to help them drive a higher price point, because that'll ripple back into the upstream? But we've got to think about it a bit differently. We can't keep thinking about it in the traditional aspect of billboard, diamond, store
yeah.
by diamond. I just don't think that's how it's going to work in the future.
Well, I mean, when you bring tech into this conversation, my mind immediately sort of um, goes to it's counter to the idea of personalized and customized product and experience. because it feels like that I, and maybe it's because I associate ChatGPT and AI with automation, and so automation is is something that's replicable, and I don't want to see that I don't want to see the industry falling into that trap of,
Yeah, right.
I want it. I do see the value in customization, in the personal experience, and of course there is, of course that technology can enable that, but
But don't you feel like, I mean, AI is a tool for customization. AI is a tool for hyper personalization. So, for example, I hear you on. When you go on ChatGPT or you go on any of these things and you talk to them, it just does feel pretty personalized. Like it's far more personalized than a Google search, right? Like when I ask it a question, it's got a bit of a personality in the way it talks back to me, the
yeah,
way it engages, right? So like it has the ability, and we mustn't blur like agentive, which is like let them face your customer. That's a different thing. To use
sure.
the tool to help you
I
research
mean,
and design
it does have personality, but it's a very formulated response mechanism still,
Yeah, yeah,
to
it'll
some
get better.
extent. But just in our final minutes, I do want to ask. I want to bring up the idea of the diamond jewelry experience, because the big competing product today, and the way consumers have are spending their money is on experience.
Yeah,
Be it on travel, be it on cool events that people go to, be it on fine dining, and I'm struggling with the idea of where diamond jewelry fits into that. Is that, is it a,
yeah,
or does it compete? Does it enhance that experience when people show themselves at a great event, or at a lovely restaurant? They will wear beautiful jewelry. So where does what is the diamond experience? What does that mean? Is it,
yeah. Well, I mean, these things are intrinsically linked, and experiences are greater in the sense that let's not talk about COVID, but that definitely we learned something in that kind of dip, and then obviously revenge travel and that. But experiences as you described, live events, etc., are becoming far more popular, and people are spending a higher share of wallet on it. I think our job as an industry that creates something that is aspirational, that is something that people want, is to make that the thing they want to have and wear at that event. Like you want them to be able to be proud of the things that they're wearing, to talk about the things that they're wearing, to make it a centerpiece of either understated or overstated, whichever way they want it. And I think that brands do that very well. So we spoke a little bit about um, distinctive designs that brands have that I could see. And I'm an engineer, right? I can see from a mile away if you're wearing a Van Cleef because it's the Alhambra stuff and it's clear, like or the Cartier bracelet that is very clear.
yeah, yeah,
What's the natural diamond version of that you look at and you go, that's pretty cool. That's pretty impressive, right? Because that's what humans do. That's what we do. That's what we want. And then we need to find a way of making that a very important part of that experience. So when you're thinking about that experience, there's a piece of it that is reserved for buying diamond jewelry. And then I think part of that is that marketing thing, is the signaling of when people are on social media and things like that, and they're at those events and they're doing those things, that part of that story is the natural diamond piece or the diamond piece. I think that's the loop that we need to create. And again, I don't want to, like, it's really hard. Like, it's really, really, really hard. But we're an industry that has come from non-existence until such time as that lady in the 50s sat down and wrote "A Diamond Is Forever," right? Like, as a young copywriter, and it exploded. And I think we need that moment again. And the only way we're going to do that is if we come together as an industry, whether you're a store that has lab grown or natural, or you're a manufacturer who does both, all together, to try to find a far more intelligent way of garnering that attention, those eyeballs, away from all these other experiences, or being subtly part of all of those experiences, of
yeah.
which all the red carpets are, they're all there already, right?
Right.
You don't have to do anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think and and this actually this idea came up and got me thinking. At Vicenza, I was involved in a panel discussion there, and this question came up, and in the industry we tend to think about that the experience as the buying experience, so like we get caught up in trying to figure out how do we compete with the fun purchasing experience that you might have in an Apple store or
Yeah,
in,
exactly.
you know, but really the experience is in the wearing of the jewelry.
And it's
And
forever. It's
and
literally like
the,
it's the
right,
piece that you buy
right.
once and you can wear it a million times. Like whereas an iPhone has got 2 years and then you can't use the thing again.
Right, right. But how do we keep that experience, or that the idea of that experience, front and center of the consumer? I think that's the big challenge of the day.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And it's
Anyway,
that value conversation that we're having is pivoting to finding the incremental value that we can have with new customers and more customers and things like that. And then underneath that is being far more intentional about the dollars we're spending on attracting that for that purpose, to your point, to change the mindset to go, I'm buying this because I can wear it at all of the events and all the travel and all the things that I do. It is the more important thing, right? Like it's,
yeah, yeah,
you know what I
yeah.
mean? Yeah.
Well, I mean, that was kind of the idea of Lightbox, and the messaging that De Beers put across with Lightbox is that there's everyday diamonds, but it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be a lab grown thing. There's scope for
Yeah.
aspiration in more affordable natural diamond jewelry. I'm convinced of it. It's just a matter of, again, and I think branding will play a big part of that as well, moving forward. And as you mentioned, the for whatever reason, currently the natural diamond, that value product, which I'm not shy to say,
Yeah.
is more conducive to great branding and to beautiful design as well. You know, so I think that's
That I not to end the debate on agreement, but that I completely agree with. I'm not gonna jump on your lightbox point again because that's a much longer
sorry, I
discussion.
too.
But I agree, and I agree on the branded front. And you can see it in the research. Brands are increasing, and people want to buy from brands because they trust them, and those
Yeah,
brands just want to be
yeah,
very sure that they can be trusted. Otherwise, they got a huge amount of trouble coming,
yeah,
which I think is what's going to happen in the next few years. But I
yeah,
do think that if you just look at this, what we started with, it is so many existential events happening at the same time. We have to pivot, and we have to really be laser focused on value. We have to. I just can't see a world where
yeah,
we
yeah.
don't thrive if not.
Even if that leaves segments of the market behind, which I think inevitably is. Well, I think it's happening anyway, but
I
it
think it's
might be
happening.
inevitable. But I think that's certainly the way the direction the industry is moving.
I agree
Wes,
with that.
thanks so much. It's really great discussion. I enjoyed it and appreciate your insights.
Yeah, thank you, Avi. I always enjoy talking to you, so thank you very much. And I hope some of that was insightful and useful. And if not, and if you disagree, by all means, let's put it in the chat and let's have a conversation
We will
because
do.
we need to
Okay.
talk.
Well, thanks everyone for watching, and we'll be back next week with another discussion.